Hello world, and we are back. My name is Kyle Fishel. This is going to be episode 192 of my poker vlog. For this video, I play a 2-5 session at the Hard Rock in Tampa, Florida. I have a ton of hands to go over, so we're going to get right into them. I buy into this game for $1,200, even though the max is $1,500. Most players are sitting with a little under $1K, so 12 should be fine. And on the first interesting hand, I looked down at pocket eights from the low jack. I raised to $20. The hijack, button, small blind, and big blind all decide to call, so 5 ways to a flop, looking for a set, but instead we get 2 overcards on Queen Jack 7 Rainbow.
Wow, this is garbage.
This is just simply not the board that I'm going to bet into 4 other players. I think it's pretty crazy to without at least top pair or a set. So when I check, the hijack decides to bet $60, and this slowly clears out the entire field. Not a super big hand, but a few like this means our stack has been dwindling a bit. Next interesting hand. I am in the +1 position. I raised to $20 with King Queen offsuit. The hijack calls and the button calls, so we end up going 3 ways to a flop, which comes King 9-7 with 2 hearts. Flopping top pair, I think is a pretty standard bet spot, so I bet a little bit under half pot, $40. Would love to get value from any King X, 9X, straight draws, flush draws, all kinds of stuff. And for $40, the hijack calls and the button folds. So we end up going heads up to a turn card, which is the 10 of clubs. Brings 2 clubs, so now 2 flush draw board. Queen Jack gets there, but I block it. And I think this is a very natural check spot. I think my opponent has some middling 2-pair combinations that are possible. And when I check, my opponent bets $80. He didn't look too comfortable with this bet. He honestly looked very unsure of himself, which kind of led me to wanting to pounce here. I do block the nuts of Queen Jack. I have a club to block backdoor flush draws, so I think my opponent can easily have like Ace-5 of hearts, 10-8, 10X of hearts, maybe 10 Jack and 10 Queen at some frequency. So, spotting a little bit of a live tell as well as my exact hand, I decided to just rip it in.
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You are a fucking idiot.
For about $450, and my opponent looks immediately in agony. Absolutely hates this spot. Feel very good about my move here. Think that it puts a lot of flush draws in a tough spot. Maybe even some of the weakest 2 pairs will hate this, as I kind of have Queen Jack here a lot of the time when I do this line. But my opponent eventually makes the call, and the river is the 8 of clubs. And now my opponent shows King 10 of diamonds. Kind of a pretty dirty slow roll, honestly. I mean, this is kind of a snap call to get it in when you turn top 2 pair, in my opinion, but oh well, that's fine. And as I'm counting out the bet to pay him, he asked the dealer if I have to show because it's an all-in. And if a player is asking the specific ruling and to see your cards while you're paying them off, they're either very recreational or have absolutely no respect at all.
Criminals in this town used to believe in things. Honor, respect.
So that is what happened, and we pay the man and move on.
Whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you a stranger.
With 1 limp, I'm in the hijack with pocket 9s. I raise to $20. Only the limp decides to call, so we're heads up to a flop of 4-4-3 with 2 spades. Seems pretty good for me. It's hard to have an overpair with 9s, so happy to bet here. I bet $25. My opponent makes the call. On the turn 8 of hearts, I have to size up here a little bit. I bet 60. Can easily get value from 5-6, any 2 spades, 8X, pocket 5s, pocket 6s, pocket 7s. They'll definitely pay off a bet. And maybe even like Ace-5, Ace-Deuce at some frequency. And for $60, my opponent makes the call again. The river is the 10 of spades. Pretty bad one. Over to 9s, the spades get there. My opponent checks to me. I think there's no reason to bet this river here. All the straight draws are never calling and may even turn their hands into a bluff, which will put me in a terrible spot. And all flush draws are probably snapping when they get there. And when I check it back, my opponent does have Ace-6 of spades.
Larry, what the hell are you doing?
Larry!
Larry, you can't just... Oh,
Larry! Oh, are you alright? How did...
So, could not fade the flush draw on this one. Kind of disappointing to have that run out, but oh well, we move on. With 9-10 of clubs from the +1 position, I raise it to $15. The cutoff button and big blind decide to call, so that means we're 4 ways to a flop, which comes Ace, King, Jack with 2 clubs. Have a massive draw, gut shot plus flush draw, feels great. I bet $25 as, although this board will favor me in general, against 4 players, if anyone has any 2 pair, any ace, they're never really folding, so we'd like to just build the pot slowly and make our draw here. If this was heads up, I like sizing up a little bit bigger here and get folds from like the weaker parts of their range, but 4 players, it's tough to get through on the flop. So $25 brings the button and the big blind along. Turn is the 10 of spades. So we make a pair. We didn't really want to make a pair. In fact, it's pretty bad we made a pair because now our straights kind of counterfeit. I decided to check. Out of position, any of these opponents could have called with any random queen, which is just never folding here. So I check, but not really trying to give up on this hand. It checks through, and the river is the 6 of hearts. Now I think you have to go for a bet here. Any player who had a queen would absolutely bet a 2 flush draw board. They're definitely not slow playing a board this dangerous. So when we can discount anyone having a straight, we should just be bombing here. But I check thinking that in this specific table, even 2 pairs are just going to get a little too sticky for me. I don't think I'm going to get like ace king to fold here ever, or jack 10. But when I check, it checks through, and the big blind has king jack offsuit.
Very.
Maybe we get that hand to fold, maybe we don't. I wish I would have made the attempt now because, it's pretty possible. I think this one gets through, 50-50. But now it's time to play a big one. In the big blind, we look down at pocket queens, a very welcome sight. With 1 limp, the cutoff raises to 15. We are definitely 3-betting queens. We make it 45. Let's build this pot, but I guess it's not going to happen because both players fold. Disappointing, but at least we won a hand. Which brings us to queen jack of clubs on the button. When it folds all the way to me, I make it $15. Both small blind and big blind call. 3 ways to king 10-8 with 2 spades. Well, we flop the open ender, and when it's checked to me, we're going to size up here a little bit. No showdown value, but a pretty strong draw, good for our range. I bet $35. Only the big blind decides to stick around, and the turn is the 5 of hearts. And on this card, the big blind decides to lead for 55. I often say that small leads are often flush draws or some kind of draw trying to name their own price, but I wouldn't really consider this a small lead. This is like a medium-sized lead. So to me, I think it weighs a little bit more towards value. So I think calling and reevaluating in position is the best option. That's what I do, and the river is the jack of hearts. We make a pair, but a straight would have been much, much better. And now our opponent checks to me. Like, is there a chance he has like a really good draw, like jack 9 of spades? I'm not sure, but when rivering some showdown value, I'm pretty happy to just check this one back. Hope he just has like ace 10 and getting really weirdly out of line. But he has 10-8 offsuit.
What's going on here? Oh.
Sir, I'm arrested. Oh.
So 2 pair, I've been saying this a lot, but I really don't think opponents are folding 2 pair at this table, especially when they check river. They typically check river to call bets. No one really checks river to check fold, even when the board is somewhat dicey. All right, let's win a pot. 7-8 of spades might be the answer. I button straddle. When the small blind and undergun player limps, I make it $40, and both of those players decide to call. So 3 ways to a flop of queen 8-5 with 2 spades. All right, we've missed some flush draws all day. Maybe this is the time where we complete one. It would be nice. I start with a 1/3 pot size bet. Think this board's good for my range. Get all the middling pocket pairs out of there, the weakest queens. But to the $40 bet, the small blind decides to call, and then the other player decides to fold. So heads up to a turn card, which is probably one of the better turn cards I could ask for without making my hand. 6 of hearts means that when it's checked to, we are going to empty the clip. We have 8 high, but a ton of equity. We would love our opponent to fold all of his queens, his weak aces, maybe jack 10 or king jack peels the flop at some frequency, but will definitely fold to a $140 turn bomb, and my opponent folds pretty quickly. So we're able to get this one through. Haven't made too many hands today, but at least we're able to get some of these bluffs through. Which brings us to a fun one. We have pocket 7s. When under the gun raises to $20, we're in middle position. We decide to call. The button calls, the small blind calls, the big blind calls. 5 ways. Is it our time to hit a set? No. The flop is 9-4-4 rainbow. And when it checks to me, I think I'm just going to bet here. As I'm just a caller from middle position, I could easily have any 4 here. I could have ace 9, pocket 9s, and my exact hand of a middling pocket pair that doesn't really want random like queen jacks and ace highs to be able to see the turn. So we're going to go closer to pot with this one. We make it $80, and one by one we get everyone to fold. So suppose this is kind of a mergey, bluff, protection, value bet, all of it in one, but whatever it was, it definitely worked. With queen jack of hearts in the cutoff, the +1 raises to $15. The hijack calls, I'm in the cutoff, I call, button calls, and the small blind calls as well. We are going 5 ways, as we've been doing many times with this specific table. You really need to make a hand to make some money here. And on 10-9-6 Rainbow, we have an open-ended 2 overcards. We're actually loving our hand at this point. We've missed a lot of straight draws today. Maybe this one is our time. The +1 player continues for $40. Hijack calls. I'm going to call this one. I think raising's kind of a mistake with this draw. With too many people showing somewhat interest in this hand, it's hard to get a bluff through that much action. So when I call the 40, the button decides that I'm going to bluff anyway. I make it 200, which means the other gun player is all in for 550. Hijack folds. I reluctantly let my hand go. It's not fun because I am drawing to the nuts. There are no dirty flush draw outs available right now. But I guess either of these opponents could have like 7-8 and just have me one less out than I'm thinking I have. I decided to let it go. Think it's pretty standard. Don't think you can continue here. But the button calls. We get to see the run out, which comes Jack of Diamonds, 6 of Hearts. And the player who went all in had 9-10. So we actually would have won this one with Jacks and 6s. Kind of a gross run out to look at, but I'd say that's just hindsight. This one needs to be a fold here most of the time, and we'll never know what the button decided to make his move with. On the next interesting hand, I looked down at pocket 5s in the big blind. The hijack raised to $15. It folds to me. You could 3-bet this in a heads-up position, just try to take the pot down, but this opponent in particular had been on the tighter side, so I'm not trying to do anything crazy just yet. I make the call with pocket 5s, and the flop is Queen 6 for Rainbow. When I check, my opponent bets $30. Pot size C bet, definitely on the higher side, but I would say that there's plenty of turn cards that give me the ability to float and take it away. So we're going to play this one, see what develops, and for $30, the turn is the 7 of Diamonds. This card is definitely go time.
I never yielded! And as you can see, I am not dead!
When I check, my opponent bets $55, another relatively large bet, but we're going to raise this one. If we have pocket 5s here with the 5 of Diamonds, we definitely have 5-3. We have 5-6 of Diamonds, 6-7, a ton of 2 pairs and straights available, and if you had just like King-Queen here, this board is not what you like facing a raise with from the big blind. So I do oblige and make it 175. I've seen this opponent fold top pairs to aggression, so we're going to take that information and try to put it to use here. And my opponent doesn't take too long before letting it go. So this is definitely a bluff, but we had a ton of equity when called, and we feel pretty good about this move. And that brings us to a final hand of note. With a button straddle, the under the gun player raises to $35. I decide to 3-bet to 110 with Ace-King offsuit. And to this bet, it doesn't take too long before the cutoff to jam with $800.
No.
And to this jam, I'm actually surprised that anyone at the table took any time with this decision at all. This player in particular took probably 45 seconds to call off his stack when it was only $400 with pocket kings pre. So him raising to 800 with no hesitation for betting, this isn't even like a tough decision. And when each player slowly and finally folds, I pretty much snap fold. I'm not interested in like tanking and pretending like there's a decision here. And my opponent shows pocket aces. I'm not shocked in the slightest.
In terms of money, we have no money.
But because several hands went the other way this day, we end up losing $790 across 3 hours at the Tampa Hard Rock, which equates to $263 an hour or 52 big blinds an hour. Yeah, for the middle part of this session, it felt like I kept getting slapped in the face over and over again. My opponents just had like nutted hands or made their draws, and I was kind of whiffing a lot of things. On the bright side, I was able to get a few successful semi-bluffs through, so without those, the session really goes downhill. Maybe next time I'm up in this area, I will actually make some hands, make the game a lot easier, and not run ace-king into aces. If you've made all of this point, I appreciate it. Thank you for watching, thank you for the support, and I will see you on the next one.